Good morning, students. Class 9, hello. This is the first video of chapter 6 pollination. But before going to start this chapter, I would really like to appreciate that you all are seriously looking for the video lessons and have started this video lessons for your study purpose. So that's really great. Keep going on. Let us back to the discussion of pollination. So students, you from class 3rd, class 4th, you are reading about the pollination. In this class 9th, again it's pollination, but it is about detailed study of the pollination, different types of pollination, and how nature favors cross pollination and how some features favor self pollination too. There are some advantages and disadvantages. So all we are going to discuss in this chapter. So let's get started this video lessons and try to find out the answers of all these questions. So let's start. 6 pollination. These are the learning objectives which we are going through in this chapter. So let us start with the first topic, pollination. Pollination, students from class 5th, you are reading about that what is pollination. It is for the transfer of pollen grains from anther, which is a male part, to the female part, that is stigma. That transfer is called pollination. Pollination is very important because it is the prerequisite for fertilization. Fertilization, it means that the fusion of male and female gametes. And after that, it leads to the formation of seeds and fruits. So for that, pollination is very important. This pollination is also important for studying of external characteristics of the flower. Or we can say for comparative study of the evolution from primitive times to this time, this earlier times, or we can say that this modern era. So there are some changes may happen in the flowers, and with the help of pollination, by pollination, we can study this. And there are some mediators which help in pollination. They work as an external agency, and that's how they help in pollination. And these are the agents, or we can say these are called pollinators. What these pollinators, example of these pollinators are like air, water, or insects, animals. All these are the um, pollinators, or we can say agents of pollination. Now next topic is types of pollination. So pollinations broadly it is of two types. One is called self-pollination and second one is called cross-pollination. Though self-pollination is also of two types, that is autogamy and geitonogamy. What are they? I will explain it later. Just you see the picture and try to find out that what does it means. The first one, autogamy, that is the self pollination. Okay, here you see that bee is transferring something, okay, transferring pollen grains. And then bee, it is also that bee is transferring pollen grains from one flower to another flower. And in the cross pollination, you can see it is also transferring pollen grains from flower to flower of different plants. So maybe that you are having an idea for that. So let us start with the self pollination. Self pollination, it means the pollination which happens selfly, which occurs selfly, like that when the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the flower of the same plant, when there it is in the same plant, then we can say it is self pollination. This self pollination can be of two types because there are two conditions. It can be within the same flower or it can be in the another flower of the same plant. So that's how this is divided. This self pollination is divided into two categories. The first one is autogamy. Autogamy, it means within the same flower. For that, it is very important that flower should be bisexual. Okay, bisexual flower, and both that stamen and carpel. Stamen is a male reproductive part and carpel is the female reproductive part of a flower. So both should mature at the same time. And if it is so, then it is called autogamy. An examples are wheat and rice. Then geitonogamy. Geitonogamy, it means when pollen grains deposit from anther to the stigma of the uh, different flowers, but in the same plant, then it is called geitonogamy. For that, it is not required that the flower should be bisexual. It can be that flower can be unisexual, but of the same plant. It means that within the same plant there could be stamen, and in another flower there is pistil. Okay, so both are unisexual flowers, so it can be transferred. And sometimes it needs external agency. Generally, self pollination does not need it, but here the external agency can help. Okay, so these are the two types of by self pollination. And example of geitonogamy is corn and maize. Here you can see the picture of the first type. First type, it means what? Here it is in the within the flower. So which what is that type of pollination? What is it called? Autogamy. And in the second one, you can see that this plant is same, but the flowers are different. So it is which type of pollination? Geitonogamy. Yes. Features favoring self pollination. There are some features which help in self pollination. First thing is that the flower should be bisexual. If the flower is bisexual, then only self pollination happens. Self pollination occur. And one more thing, that they are bisexual, but they should mature at the same rate. It means that the male and female part should mature at the same time. Second thing is that stigma is situated directly below the anthers. If stigma is situated directly, stigma is the landing surface which gives a landing surface to the pollen grains. So when it is directly below the anthers, so it is easy for anthers to discharge their pollen grain over the surface of stigma. So this is second point. Third is that clistogamous flower or histogamy. Clistogamy is what? That uh, bisexual flowers, some bisexual flowers, they do not open throughout the time. So when they do not open and they are actually bisexual, so within them this pollination, this self pollination is very easy because they are not open for cross pollination. It means not wind or not water make them to have cross pollination. So it's for that we can say that here features favor self pollination. So this is the third condition where self pollination is favored. Advantages of self pollination. There are some advantages like for survival and perpetuation. When the species are very rare or uncommon, so for that species this self pollination is the only source, or this is the means of their survival. Okay, so self pollination for that species, it is very important, or we can say that is the only resource they have to produce their own offsprings. Second thing is that where plants are separated by distance, if the plants are separated by distance, and for them cross pollination is also very difficult because the same insect or the same bird or the winds may carry the same type of pollen grains. It's not so possible. Okay, so for that self pollination is more important. Then does not dependent on external agency. For self pollination, external agency does not work because it is happened naturally. So or we can say that self pollination occur naturally in them. So for that external agency is not needed. It means that external agencies are not available, or that pollinators are not available. So instead of that, there is pollination occur in them, self pollination occur in them. Then less pollen and energy is wasted. Yes, that pollen grains are not so much wasted, and energy is also not wasted because energy like wind energy or that water energy, that hydro energy is not needed to carry them to a long distance. Okay, because it is a self pollination. So all these are the advantages of self pollination. Now disadvantages of self pollination. Yeah, though there are some advantages, but disadvantages also. The first one is that if there is a continuous self pollination, then what has happened that the weaker offsprings are produced. It results in a weaker offsprings. Second thing is that no new varieties or variations can be produced. The same type of species, the same type of organisms are produced. What, no difference is there. No difference Like if, for example, the pea plant is producing wrinkle type of seeds, so in the next generation also it produces wrinkle type of seeds, no new varieties. But if it is about cross pollination, so there are two parents from different places, different plants. But here in this self pollination, it occurs in the same plant. So that's why no new varieties. It means no genetic uh, combination, new gene combination will be seen. Then third is defective or weaker characteristics of the variety. Yes, if the generation, if for example the plant is having less viable seed, we can take example of pea plant. Okay, so pea plant is having less viable seeds, or the seeds, the pod color is yellow. So what that the next generation produced by it will having the same type, that it will not produce viable seeds in the next generation also. So this is the defective character, and we want to eliminate this defective character. But by self pollination, it will not eliminate it. These defective characters cannot be eliminated, or weaker characteristics cannot be eliminated. The next thing, adaptability to change environment are reduced. Yes, it is reduced because as pollen grains transfer from one place to another, so they suffer adapt some environmental changes. But in the self pollination, this adaptability is reduced. Then next is cross pollination. Cross pollination, the second type of pollination. It is what? It is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower of, or we can say of the same species. It means here the plant, there are two plants. Transfer of pollen grain is occurring from anther to the stigma of another flower of another plant, or different plants, but it is of same species. And we can say it is cross pollination. It is also called as xenogamy. Uh, and as I told you, that it involves two separate plants, and also it needs external agencies. External agency means what? We can say pollinators, or what we can say examples are wind, water, insects, birds, human beings, all are the external agencies. Here you can see in the picture that how cross pollination occurs. A pollinator visits flower to collect nectar. Here you can see that bee is collecting nectar, and that's how some of the pollen grain can stick on its body. Okay, and then when it is sticking, then it reaches to another flower, and some of the pollen grains from its body dusted onto the stigma. So this is how pollination, this cross pollination occurs. Now, some adaptation in plants for cross pollination. You know what, students? It's that nature also favors cross pollination. It may that some flowers may develop changes or adapt some specific structural changes, so that they do not favor self pollination and they encourage cross pollination. Let us find it out that how. The first one is unisexuality, separate male and female flowers. When the plant is having, or when there are different plants which are having uh, male flowers and female flowers, so separate male and female flowers are there. Okay, so that does not um, encourage self pollination, it encourages cross pollination. And if the plants are different, so it definitely encourage cross pollination. Then example is papaya and palm. Then second one is self sterility. Self sterility, it means that the pollen grains fail to germinate on the stigma of the same flower. If it is about the same flower, then these pollen grains do not germinate, but they ready to germinate, and they germinate even when they are pass on, or they are deposit on the another flower of the same species. Let us see it. Here you can see this first picture about unisexuality. It means the first flower you can see it is that it is having ovary, or we can say pistil carpel is developed, and in the second one stamen is developed. Okay, so that is the first one is female flower and the second one is male flower. So that is called unisexuality. having only one sexual characteristic, either of male or of female. And here you can see cell sterility. It means that the uh, pollen grain falls on the surface of stigma, but it does not germinate into pollen tube. Okay. And second condition is that pollen grain falls on the stigma, okay, deposit on the stigma, and but unable to germinate the complete pollen tube to reach to the ovary. So this is the second thing. So in both the condition that this pollen tube unable to reach to the ovary, and that's how we can say it is a self sterility. But the same pollen grain, when it falls on another stigma of the different flower, then it is able to produce pollen tube and can reach to the ovary and ovule. The next one, dichogamy. Dichogamy is what? Anthers and stigma mature. There are different rates of maturation of anther and stigma in so many flowers. Let us see it. In sunflower, proto-entry we can see. Anthers mature before the stigma. If anthers mature before the stigma, then anthers are ready to pollinate, but the stigma is not ready. Similarly, protogyny, here stigma matures before. It means the female part matures first and the male part is immature. So that time it is not ready to have pollination or to have fertilization. Example is banyan tree. Here in the picture you can see the first one showing protogynous. It means that the gynous, or we can say that gynoecium, germinates priorly. This red arrow you can see. In this red arrow, this is the gynoecium which germinates, but sorry, this mature, but the anthers are not ready. It means they are immature. And in protoandrous, here all anthers are mature, but the gynoecium, the female characteristics or the carpel is not immature or not mature on time. There are different rates of maturation of anthers and stigma. Now the next terminology is heterostyle. Heterostyle, some plants bear two types of flowers. Two types of flowers, like one type has long stamens and short style. If stamens are short, stamens are long and styles are short, then also fertilization, then also self pollination cannot occur. And similarly, if the stamens are short and styles are long, then also pollination will not be favorable or will not occur. So this is how that self pollination in such flowers cannot occur. Then the last one is that hercogamy. Hercogamy means that structural barrier is present between stigma and anthers. Structural barriers, it means some obstacle is there and which does not allow the pollen grains to deposit over the stigma. Pansy is a good example. Pansy is a flower which does not, develop woody structure over it, over the stigma, so that the anthers do not fall on the stigma. Okay. Similarly, here example of calotropis and zeuxin is given. In calotropis, that here in the middle you can see that ovary is there, and this anthers are uh, uh, positioned below it. Okay, so this for this anther is not capable to reach to the ovary, and in the zeuxin it is the same. So this terminology is called hercogamy. So all this terminology shows that there is some structural barriers caused, or some sort of development is there which favors cross pollination but not favoring self pollination. Here the summary of the whole chapter, that self pollination versus cross pollination. Students, you can take screenshot of it and try to understand all these points which we have already discussed. First, second, third, fourth, and fifth. See the fifth point, I think, which may be that you confuse in this. Self pollination reduces the gene pool and cross pollination maintains the gene pool. So, what is gene pool? Gene pool, it means that genetic combination. So self pollination has less genetic combination. It means no variations is found in self pollination, but in cross pollination, variations can occur. Why it is so? Because there are two different plants, so they are genetically different. So that's why they can maintain that cross pollination maintains gene pool. Okay, and remaining all the topics, all the points, I have explained it to you. So read it carefully, and this is done for today. Have a nice day.